On June 5th, 2025, the Nintendo Switch 2 will launch, and the longest console generation in Nintendo history will come to an end. But there will be plenty of time to talk about the Switch 2 in the coming months. Today is the Switch's last moment in the sun, and it should be special for such a special console. It's actually so special, I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do with it. Initially, I wanted to do a review, but I realized that after 8 and a bit years, if you wanted one, you've probably got one. And instead, I settled on this. An informal video where I talk about my thoughts on the console, a bit of a retrospective, where we're going to answer the simple question, was the Nintendo Switch worth $399 or $299 USD? Now, to be clear, despite the name, this isn't a review. There's no rubric to fill out, although I might make reference to it from time to time. There's no consistency to be had. These are my unfiltered thoughts about the console that's powered this channel since its inception, pretty much, and continues to serve it to this day, and will probably make appearances from time to time after the Switch 2 launches. So, expect there to be bias, because this will be biased. So, to begin, we should probably talk games, because, well, why else would you have bought this thing? I remember being in grade 9 when the Switch 1 first came out, and it actually, fun fact, it came out on my 15th birthday. And I remember having to wait 3 months until the end of the school year before I could get it. I also remember that time being, well, torture, and me spending a lot of time watching Breath of the Wild content on YouTube, getting spoiled about the game. Which admittedly explains why I might not like Breath of the Wild that much. And I remember the summer I got it, I played it I was very excited to play it, and I pretty much no-lifed it for that summer. And I had a great time with Breath of the Wild. I also really remember that being the only game I really played. My parents did get me ARMS as well. And eventually that same summer I did get myself Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. But for a while, all I played was Breath of the Wild until I was thoroughly done with it, and eventually the DLC. And eventually, though, obviously, I got Mario Kart, and I got ARMS, and I did have a great time with Mario Kart, and ARMS was alright, I guess. I will say, though, that I didn't like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe as much as I liked Mario Kart Wii. And I still don't like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe as much as I like Mario Kart Wii. But that's really just how it was for me from 2017 and most of 2018. Because I was busy in high school with the IB program. And so the Switch sat mostly unused and gathering dust. And it was really only used when friends came over. However, at the end of 2018, I got Smash Ultimate, and wow. I remember booting it up for the first time, and finding a Zelda series character to play, and actually mained Sheik for the first few months of Ultimate's lifespan. Mainly because Sheik was the first Zelda character I came across in World of Light. And eventually I switched to Link, and then Young Link, picked up Zelda as a secondary of all things. And one night after I absolutely decimated someone with Zelda, I decided that I was just a Zelda main from then on out. That summer, I went into grade 12 and went into competitive Smash at my locals in fall of 2019. Went twice over 7 months because I was very busy in grade 12 and was constantly doing university applications. And was just about to start going regularly when, well, the main event of 2020 happened. And when that happened, I'd really just entered online events and all that, kept trying to improve. Long story short, I kept at it until summer 2022, I think it was June, when I retired. And because I got diagnosed with carpal tunnel syndrome out of playing Steve for 3 days. And then that summer I started this channel. Ultimately, I was there for Alt's early lifespan, its DLC reveals, and honestly, my views on Smash Ultimate could be a whole video of its own, and this is intended to be not that. So, yeah. Alas, the big thing that the Switch did do for me was introduce me to other franchises, both first party from Nintendo and not. So Switch 1 is how I got into Xenoblade for the first time, or Final Fantasy, or The Witcher, or Elder Scrolls, among others. In fact, my first ever playthrough of both Skyrim and Witcher 3 were on Switch. And I really enjoyed the time I spent with them, to the point where I rebought both of them on Steam when I got the Steam Deck, and now own all of Elder Scrolls and Witcher there too, except the Oblivion remaster. I also now own all of Xenoblade on Switch, and it was, in fact, my first experience playing The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, or Majora's Mask, or Final Fantasy VII, was on Switch. It really was, or is, a third-party powerhouse, even if the console itself isn't all that powerful. It's what got me through the first 3 years of my undergrad until I got the Steam Deck in July of 2023. Obviously, this part is severely abridged, and I could probably spend at least 20 to 30 minutes on this part alone, and if this was a review, I might do that, but not today. In terms of library, the Switch is unmatched in terms of quality titles and would easily score a 5 out of 5 in library. But, and this is something that does kind of affect me a little bit and does affect the way I see the console, the absolutely atrocious amount of shovelware on the eShop. Seriously, there's a lot of shovelware on there that Nintendo has failed to address, which does personally have an effect on the eShop itself. What is particularly egregious, and I'm not sure if Nintendo has addressed this, maybe they have, is games getting to the bestseller list by going on sale for like a penny or something, and then rocketing up the charts. Now this makes searching for anything interesting on the eShop a chore, and personally I just use the Nintendo site itself to get stuff digitally. It also doesn't help that until recently the eShop was slower than my brain calculating the product of two large numbers before coffee. And this does affect the gaming experience and is one big sore spot in what is otherwise a great setup. Except themes, but that can be fixed if you have certain Nintendo Switch consoles. More on that later. And sadly, once I got the Steam Deck, my use of the Switch went down a lot, but I still use it for new Nintendo releases, and I never felt left out on Switch even before getting the deck, outside of franchises like Fallout, which are excellent, and I hope they come to Switch too. Even as I write this, Xenoblade Chronicles X is open on my Switch waiting to be resumed, and I still use it for Mario Kart or Smash sessions with friends, or when I'm playing those games on the channel. But for third party, the Switch just isn't as powerful as the deck, and I prefer to play third party titles on there instead. Which brings us to our next topic, hardware. Oh boy. Personally, I don't care a ton in the hardware of my consoles outside of new hardware releases, but the Switch is definitely showing its age a lot these days. The Tegra X1 powering it is from around 2015, and it wasn't exactly powerful to begin with. But it was presumably cheap, so Nintendo went with it, and for what Nintendo's needed to do with the Switch, the X1 was powerful enough. I certainly can't complain about what we got on Switch in terms of first-party titles, and to a lesser extent, to an extent, the trade-off was worth it. I really liked being able to take my games on the go with me in a way I couldn't with the Wii, and even though I don't do it much, I like having the option. In fact, I liked it so much, that's why I got the Steam Deck when I was shopping for a secondary console in 2023 over a PS5 or an Xbox Series S. The handheld factor is simply too good. And yes, I never had a DS or a 3DS or PSP or Vita, so the Switch was really my first handheld of sorts. And yeah, what I do care about more is the quality of controllers and other peripherals, and well, yeah, there's issues. Personally, I've had Pro controllers start drifting on me, docks that no longer charge Pro controllers or output video, and of course Joy-Con drift. Now, luckily, the first two issues were easily dealt with by Nintendo after I paid them money, and one of my Pro Controllers is 8 years old and hasn't started drifting yet. And my Skyward Sword HD Joy-Cons have given me 0 issues. But it is important to acknowledge these issues do exist, and I would be remiss to not mention them here. These days, of course, Nintendo will repair drifting Joy-Cons for free in most places, which is good, but I do remember them refusing to do so and denying the issue existed, which also isn't that good. The D-pad on the Pro Controllers is also terrible, and while I've heard the Switch 2 Pro Controller has fixed that issue, I'm not getting one of those until such time as one of my existing Pro Controllers breaks. Which is, weirdly, though, despite some of my controllers being 8+ years old, I've had 0 battery issues with them. So, good job on that, Nintendo. Personally, I do enjoy my Pro Controllers a lot more than I enjoy the Joy-Cons, mainly because I find the Joy-Cons to be too small for my hands. So, hopefully Switch 2 Joy-Cons can fix that. Third-party controllers also exist, and I've used a couple, and if you're on a tighter budget, they're fine. But I do find myself preferring legitimate Pro Controllers over the third-party ones. Obviously, nicer third-party controllers exist as well, but I haven't had a chance to try them yet. Speaking of price, it's time to talk about it. The problem is that while you can find bundles and all that at times, the price of the regular console hasn't dropped in 8 years and has arguably gone up with the introduction of the OLED model in 2021. You can get a Switch Lite on a budget, but that's handheld only, and I've never found that appealing. Personally, the only time I got close to getting a second Switch was the Tears of the Kingdom OLED in 2023, but I ultimately didn't get it because I, didn't want a second Switch, and my original Switch could do stuff the Tears of the Kingdom OLED couldn't. More on that later. I do think the special edition Switches were cool enough, and I hope Nintendo continues with them into Switch 2. Overall, though, I don't think the Switch or its hardware accessories were egregiously priced, considering the quality, or Joy-Cons excluded, of course, but where it does fall down are the game prices. Unless you get lucky at EB Games or a different brick-and-mortar store, games from Nintendo tend to not go down in price as much as third-party titles, or indeed, at all. If you tend to get stuff day one like I do, you don't run into this problem as much. But after the fact, it can be very frustrating to go buy a game and find it still full price. A good example of this is the Smash Ultimate DLC, which as far as I know has never gone on sale, and all in is almost the price of the base game before you consider Mii costumes. And The Last Fighter was added in 2021 when Sora came out. Even when stuff does go on sale in the eShop, it's 33% off at most, even for games like Breath of the Wild, which released in 2017. I get why Nintendo does this, and my physical collection appreciates it. But I do think some games can permanently drop in price occasionally, even if you can find some good deals physically. Game pricing is really my one gripe with the pricing of the Switch, and hopefully as the system ages and goes out of production, you can find some good deals on Switch 1 versions of physical games, and then upgrade them later. And it'll be the same with accessories. Which brings us to our last topic for this retrospective, one that is probably going to make someone in the comments mad. Emulation. Now, before you start typing in the comments, put away the pitchforks and the torches. Hear me out. First, I know this is a weird thing to put in, but I think it's necessary given the history of Switch emulation and, well, let's be honest, certain system sellers in the Switch's history. One of the big issues with Nintendo using the Tegra X1 was that it just happened to already have a very strong hacking scene from the Nvidia Shield. And because of that, the Switch was hacked almost instantly upon release. And because the exploit is on a hardware level, Nintendo can't actually patch it. So the V1 Switches, which were from 2017 to about 2019, can be hacked by, I kid you not, a couple pieces of free software and a cheap $5 piece of hardware. Between the ease of hacking and the underpowered nature of the console, Switch emulation was actively being worked on far earlier than is normal with even a Nintendo console, and was playable far earlier than is normal, less than a year after the release of the Switch, which unfortunately did allow for piracy of first-party titles much earlier than would normally be expected. For context here, CAD PS4, for the PS4 which released in like 2013, is just now getting to the point where multiple titles are playable. And now, to be clear, I am pro emulation, as I feel the preservation of older games is important. But when you're pirating and emulating first-party titles that are available for commercial purchase, that's where I draw the line. And what this meant was certain first-party titles were leaked and playable on emulator before release. So people looking forward to those games had to essentially spoiler dodge before they came out, which ruins the experience and is flat out not cool to do. Most infamously, Tears of the Kingdom was leaked weeks before its release and playable on emulator. And I remember having to dodge spoilers left and right on Reddit and other social media sites I frequent, and I was, well, to put it mildly, annoyed. Now, okay, my experience with Switch hacking and emulation is limited. I really only use it as backups in case I lose my Switch or physical copies, or if I need to do something with a review to test performance. But I will say that they are further along than they probably should be, given the age of the console. Now, personally speaking, I have hacked my Switch just so I can have themes, and so I can dump my games to the Steam Deck so I can mod them in peace on there. I occasionally compare performance for reviews, because I do find it helpful, and just overall make sure I still have them just in case my Switch gets stolen, or breaks, or whatever. It's actually really funny, because once Switch 2 comes out, I'm gonna have my Switch games in 3 different places, which is kinda cool, but it also obsoletes at least one of the other 2. That having been said, and this is coming from someone who is obviously pro-emulation, it is clear that the emulation scene for Switch 1 did do damage, in particular with the leaking of highly anticipated games, and because of that, I do hope Switch 2 has at least a few years of not being hacked so an emulator for it doesn't get developed until the second half of its lifespan at least. Because I don't want another situation where a game leaks and is playable on emulator way early, and as a result, you have to spoiler dodge on Twitter for an extended period of time, or Blue Sky or whatever. You know, because that did really annoy me, and it, you know, even in general, I don't think current gen titles that are, or any title that's available for commercial purchase should be pirated. You know, I find that whole thing completely disgusting. And yeah, sure, maybe some of those people weren't necessarily going to buy it anyway, but I do find it, as someone who purely does this stuff, purely emulates for preservation reasons and refuses to pirate, I do find it very frustrating. And so, in conclusion, was the Nintendo Switch worth $399 Canadian dollars or $299 in the US? That depends on who you are. It really does. And personally, yes. Without the Switch, I doubt I'd have ever played Skyrim, or Witcher 3, or have gotten the Steam Deck. Heck, I might not even have started this channel. And this is gonna sound corny, and it is. But the Switch actually played a major role in me becoming the gamer I am today. And has led to me, you know, finding new people to hang out with, and making new friends both online and in person. And it's led to overall some really great times that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And I guess that's it. that's the end of this retrospective. It's not super detailed, nor should it be, but it feels final. We're at the end of an era, and when Switch 2 launches on June 5th, I only hope it has half the impact this first one had. But it's also weird. I was in grade 9 when Switch 1 launches, and when Switch 2 launches, I'll have completed all requirements for a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics. Makes me wonder what I'll have accomplished when the next generation console from Nintendo launches in 7 to 8 years. Alas, on June 5th, it's cow time. And until then, thank you all so very much for watching. And if this is content you want to see more of, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment hating on me for being, for emulating. I don't know. Don't actually do that last one, but no, seriously, leave a comment, maybe with your experiences or something. And yeah, I'm going to be doing a Switch 2 review. I don't know when it will come out. I'm aiming for the week after this video comes out, but it might be 2. I don't know. It's going to depend on how much testing needs to be done for the Switch 2. And yeah, other than that, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.